Then the big day came, August 3rd, 1967. The mall had its grand opening. I'm curious, is there anybody in here who happened to be at that grand opening? Richard? So you can attest to the fact that it was heavily attended. This kind of shows the VIPs who were there. Of course, the mayor, Duard Enoch, and Debbie Bryant, who was the Miss America the year before and an Overland Park resident. They were at the ribbon cutting. Celebrities who were there included Molly Picone and Marilyn Michaels, the famous Impressionist singer. They were appearing at Starlight at the time, doing Funny Girl. Up here we had 2 stars from the Disney movie The Gnome Mobile, which was the film that opened at the Metcalf Theater. And it had an exclusive, so it was the only theater in the country for 2 weeks where you could go see The Gnome Mobile. So the stars were present. And these 2 folks, Karen Morrow and Robert Kay, they were in town. They were about to also appear at Starlight. And Robert Kay sang the national anthem, and there was a Jewish rabbi there who offered a morning prayer. And then they cut the ribbon. So there's a, Richard, I don't know if you can spot yourself in that mass of humanity, but here is the actual ribbon cutting with the mayor and the former Miss America. And how cool. There's a piece of the ribbon right there. Donated to us by a member of this organization. She was 16 years old and she picked up this piece. And the mall opened. But not everyone was ready. Not all the tenants were ready. I would say 80% of the stores were open that opening day. Something interesting, if you look at the floor plans, again, there's something interesting on all 3 levels. How many of you knew that Sears refused to join the Merchants Association? They weren't going to pay the dues. They wanted to be autonomous and do their own thing. And Frank Morgan and his team reluctantly caved and let them not be a part of the Merchants Association, which was a decision they regretted almost immediately thereafter, because they still got the benefit of what all the other merchants were doing. But it was no-go. I'm surprised how many people don't recall that there was a grocery store at the mall. Safeway. There was a grocery store there. Okay. Right down here, hop, skip, and a jump. Remember Peaches Records? Okay, that was Safeway originally. And they closed that Safeway to go to the mall. This is interesting. This little red box up here, this is the middle level. That was slated to be a store called Bogdan's Candies. You ever heard of Bogdan's?
Yeah.
Sure you have, because who hasn't had a reception stick? Those peppermint, chocolate dipped flavored peppermint sticks. Delicious. Well, that's a local business, and they had secured a spot in the mall, and they fell into bankruptcy. So even though the space was designed and they had marketed and promoted their new location, they never moved in. Never got to move in. So instead, the Swiss Colony took their space and just worked with the design that they had already had, which was kind of a great deal for the Swiss Colony. A lot of people don't remember there was a Gulf service station as part of the mall. It was there until Gulf went out of business nationwide, and then it eventually became Brown's Chicken and Backyard Burger. That building is still there too, but it was a gas station originally. This mall aimed to provide everything you could possibly need, including a filling station. So the mall opened in August of '67, right before the back-to-school time and before the holidays. So needless to say, the upcoming holidays combined with the newness of the mall, it was a hopping place. And everybody made money. Everybody was doing gangbusters those first few months. Christmas season was great. Then, February of '68, sales dropped. And I know that there's some former tenants in here with us today who can probably relate to the cycle. Sales are good, sales are bad during the year. In February, they were bad. And all of a sudden, all these tenants like Adler's and Jack Henry, who had been doing gangbusters, saw this precipitous drop in sales and they were a little concerned. Well, Bob Gingrich shared the story with me when I interviewed him. He made it a habit of walking through the mall and just touching bases with each store's manager or owner almost daily. How's it going? How's it going? And he ran into the owner of the Lissman store, which was a fine clothing store. Bert Lissman was his name. And Bob asked him, well, Bert, how's business? Bert's reply, you want to know how bad business is right now? Even the people who don't intend to pay for it aren't buying anything. Couldn't even get shoplifters. There's a photo of the mall in 1970 taken from Metcalf, where you can sort of see the Safeway sign and the Cat's drugstore. And here is kind of that same view in 1971 in color. And the reason I'm showing you those photos is notice on the tower, no sign, no sign. So Frank Morgan still said no sign. There's a photo of that Pan fountain right after the mall opened. In fact, I think Bob said these photos were taken right before the VIP party the night before the grand opening. So it was never going to look cleaner than what you see right there. And of course, that's before they built the third floor expansion. So it's just a two-story element there. That's a photo when they just finished the landscaping. That's the theater entrance on the east side of the mall. Good old Cat's drugstore. Meow. This photo appears every now and then still in the Star. It's a stock photo, and you know it's supposed to look like a dozen women just casually shopping the mall. Well, actually, it's totally staged. All 12 of those women were relatives of the investor group, and they were the Metcalf South ambassadors. So those ladies were there for the opening week, helping assist customers, telling them where stores were, what have you. It's kind of funny because if you know where this is in the mall, it was a total dead zone. There was nothing. Eventually they would build the master video and the 1-hour photo along this wall. But those 12 ladies in search of an exit because there really was nothing to shop. The center floor fountain. That was another one where Frank Morgan had visions of the fountain spraying 30 feet in the air, and the designer said, well, we can do it, but you better have towels available for your customers. But it did shoot a good-sized spray. Eventually, that was all dismantled because you might remember they built a stage on the middle level. I can remember as a wee lad that I remember that fountain, and I remember the smell of the treated water. These photos were taken during the Christmas season, early 70s. You know, it was a good mix of tenants in that mall. There's a Swiss colony that took over what should have been the Bogdan's candy store. So we all just remember how it wasn't too big. You know, you go to some malls and you're overwhelmed. Who's been to the great mall up in Minneapolis? That overwhelmed me. But Metcalf South Mall was a good scale, good neighborhood scale. This was a photo taken during one of the earliest sidewalk sales. They recognized, that's how we get bodies in this mall. We hold an annual sidewalk sale. And the annual then became semi-annual. And then I think it even might have become quarterly at some point. Anything to get foot traffic. There's Tom McCann. Veterans Day. This is the middle level. And I mean, again, to give you an idea of the mix of tenants, in this photo alone you see the Sunglass Hut. Singer Sewing Machines, and Topsy's Sidewalk Cafe. This was a photo taken during one of the annual art sales. You know, they had art shows. And that also went from a once a year to twice a year to 4 times a year thing because it was so popular. And there's an aerial, probably from about 1976.
Wow.
Couldn't find a parking, all 5,000 of those parking spaces are gone. Yes, sir.
I just might throw in, right about that time, I was a police officer at Overland Park, and we used to direct traffic at that intersection to get into the mall, and people would come back out throwing their hands up, and we had no place to park.
And if you went out on 95th Street, they made you go east. If you went on Metcalf, they made you go south.
Yep, they got to move cars.
Yeah.
And if you have to turn around, go on down the street.
Yeah.
You got that parking lot, you were in there an hour.
What a good problem for a mall to have.
Yeah.
So, you know, my hat's off to Bob Gingrich. If he were here, I would really say what a spectacular job he did. Because the mall had something going on every week. Everything from celebrity appearances to boat shows to auto shows to art shows to voter registration, you name it. It happened at Metcalf South, and it brought the bodies in. Antique shows.
Yeah.
And of course the Daylight Moonlight event, which was popular in the 80s and the 90s, where they'd stay open until midnight, one night, 3 or 4 times a year, and people would come in jammies. Wear your jammies, get 10% off, you know, all kinds of gimmicks. Now, I want to share with you some things I discovered in my research that I'll bet you didn't know. These are what I just call Metcalf South memorable events. All right, so the mall opened in August of '67. And when it opened, there was a pizza restaurant. It was called Pizza Place, down on the lower level. And within a month, they're busted for selling beer to minors. They lose their license. And within 6 months, they pull out of the mall. And they move up to 83rd Street. So then that opened the door for a new place called Pizza Hut to come in. August of '68, the 1-year anniversary, the pop music group the Buckinghams came. Drew a huge crowd, mainly teenagers. But they were not allowed to perform for contractual reasons. So you can imagine all these teenagers who show up expecting a performance by the Buckinghams, and all they get are autographed pictures. Kind of a letdown. June of 1969, severe rains and wind blow off portions of the roof, resulting in the flooding of the Gateway Sporting Goods, Topsy's, Pappy's Barbecue, and other stores throughout the mall, because the water just finds its way the path of least resistance. I don't recall that, but it was in the Star, so it must be true. You laugh? January 1970, a father uses his own 3-year-old son to help steal groceries from the Safeway store. The man goes to court and is publicly admonished and branded by the judge as a modern-day Fagin from Oliver Twist, using his own child to steal groceries. Groceries weren't even worth $50. What a price to pay. How humiliating. August 15th, 1970. This is not funny. 16-year-old girl was kidnapped from the mall. I am not revealing her name because she is still in the area. She was kidnapped and driven to Pittsburgh, Kansas. Her kidnapper was a man named Thomas Preston Lamb. He demanded a $3,500 ransom for her safe return. So they call her parents. And she says, you know, Dad, he's got me. We're down here in Pittsburgh. He's going to kill me. $3,500. So the father says, all right, I'll meet you at Olathe tomorrow at noon. They hang up the phone, and of course he immediately calls the police. So they set up kind of a sting. And the man shows up with the kidnapped daughter. He exchanges her for the money, and right away the police pop out of the trunk and a police car comes around the corner and a high-speed chase ensues, gunfire is exchanged. One police officer is shot, 2 of them are injured enough to go to the hospital, and the kidnapper was shot but not killed. So they take him in for questioning, and they are able to determine not only did he kidnap this girl, but they're pretty sure he was the man that kidnapped and murdered a young woman from the Ward Parkway Mall just a few months earlier. And they were able to pin it on him. And the crazy thing is, he was a nutcase. He wanted the $3,500 to pay for a sex reassignment surgery. He ended up escaping from prison twice. And he's still in prison. He comes up for parole every now and then, and the family's always there to say, no, he's still crazy.